Jessica. How are you?
Great. How are you doing, beautiful?
Good. Long time no see. Oh my goodness. It's been literally, I don't even remember, like maybe a year. Thank you so much for joining me for Start the Conversation. So let's get started.
Great.
So everyone, my name is Rochelle Legrand. This is Jessica Milne. Jess, do you want to give us a little introduction or background about you and who you are?
Sure. So my name's Jessica Milne. I'm the current Miss Stratford USA, and I'll be competing for Miss Connecticut USA this coming November. I'm here to talk to Rochelle today about different issues that the LGBT community faces. I've been working in advocacy for the past 10 years for the LGBT community, so we've got a little bit of talking to do about all of that.
Awesome. So that's so great. Thank you today for joining us. So I wanted to first ask you, what is it that you identify as in terms of LGBT community?
So I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as bisexual, which I've been out since I was 15 or 16.
What was that experience like for you? Were you out to your parents, to your family, and how did everyone receive that?
So it wasn't difficult coming out to my immediate family. We were always very close, and they've always been incredibly supportive. So I felt very comfortable with that. There were a few hurdles along the way where we discussed religion and how religious beliefs factored into sexuality, but it wasn't a difficult decision to make to tell them. My extended family didn't find out until I had my first girlfriend, and they were a little bit more scattered in their responses. When I started dating a man afterwards, I was told, it's a good thing she's over her lesbian phase. That was how some of them saw it and still do see it, that if you're not actively dating a woman, your sexuality just goes back to heterosexual.
Right. Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So when you said that there was a lot of questions about Christianity and your religion, well, not Christianity, you said a lot about your religion. What kind of religious background did you and your family grow up in, and how were you raised?
We went to a Dutch Reformed church, so it's a bit of a mix of different beliefs. It's not too far from Catholicism as far as the spectrum of Christianity goes.
Okay.
But it was always something that my sister took to more strongly than I did, and it's still an incredibly important part of her life. Whereas for me, I found it difficult to find parts of the church that I related to.
Okay. Do you still attend church or that specific church at all?
I don't. Now that I've moved, I haven't been back to Old North in, I don't know how many years. My sister and her husband go to a new church now where they actually both work there, which is great. Married a pastor's son. And religion is something that I want to have be a part of my life one day, but it's not something that I've still been able to connect to. And I don't think that it's something that you should try to force if you haven't found your way there yet.
Yeah. No, that's always a really great way to think about that. I grew up with a Christian background my whole life. Most of my older generations of my family, like my parents, were raised Catholic. And as you grow older, you start realizing a lot of the things that you were just taught, those implicit biases that you have about LGBT. As I grew older, as I had my own, I started to create my own views and my own beliefs on certain things. You realize that there's a lot of things that you have to unlearn and unpack. And that's something that, even today I'm still learning and still trying to figure out, like, wait, why did I even think that? Oh, because this is what I was taught growing up older. When I was younger. And so learning to unlearn a lot of different things, I feel like is a really big part of equality nowadays. A lot of us have explicit biases, but there's things that we're taught and didn't even realize that we're trying to unpack and unlearn now.
I just saw yesterday, I'll have to send it to you later, it's 30 or 40 different figures from the Bible as people of color, because we grew up with Christianity being so whitewashed. You see that one image of Jesus, and then you have to, when you're an adult, realize the fact that all of those images that you've seen of, Mary looking like me, that is not what she would look like. So it's a beautiful image that I'll forward to you after this.
Oh my gosh, please do. I would love to. Okay, so I wanted to tell you, have you ever been made fun of or been called a derogatory term or experienced any microaggressions, which I'm sure you have, and being you live in today? Are there any of those experiences that you're interested and comfortable about speaking about?
As far as, gay slurs are concerned, that was more of an issue back in high school than something I've encountered since. But that goes back to something that people have explicitly told me, is that I am an acceptable version of a queer woman. Because of how I look, because of how I act, they say I am the inoffensive version. And people have had no problem saying that to my face when I was deciding to keep my platform through pageantry as LGBT advocacy. I had directors who told me, that's okay because you are the inoffensive face of your movement. And nobody saw anything wrong with that statement. Back when I had a girlfriend in high school, we used to face issues if we were out at the mall and holding hands. People would stare, people would say things, boys would come up to us and say that I should kiss her to prove that she's my girlfriend. Just bizarre things that, heterosexual couples don't have to deal with. And even couples that look straight. One of the issues in the community is bisexual erasure, which is the idea that if you are, for example, a bisexual woman dating a man, your sexuality no longer exists. These aren't issues I've had to confront out and about holding hands with my boyfriend. Nobody thinks of that because everybody just sees what they think is a straight relationship. And like I said, with my family, I had people who said, that was a phase. Now we just don't have to think about it or worry about it because she's clearly over that part of it. I made my notes here because I knew I was going to forget everything. Back when we were younger, you used to hear "that's so gay" about everything. Yeah, and that was just an accepted insult. It's something that I still hear occasionally now, and I have to call people out on it. I'm like, hey, so why are you saying that? What makes you think that that's okay? It's things like that that are so ingrained that people never even think about what it is that they mean when they say that.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things like having to unlearn. What you brought up about pageantry is so like, it's not hard to believe. Like I completely believe that, and I can imagine. And that's, not to deflect, but that's also something that like I've had to,
I imagine, yeah.
It's the political respectability that you have to, speak like this and have a big smile when you want to talk about those things that make people uncomfortable. But it's like on a regular basis, the fact that you have to put on this show as
it goes back to, I'm sure, the fallacy of the acceptable Black person, and the fact that you said you have to smile while making people comfortable talking about things like racism, which is mind-boggling that all of that emotional labor falls on you just to try to get an inch of change across.
Those are the words I was looking for. Thank you. Yes. It's hard, and it gets to a point where you don't want to, the feeling that the idea that you have to explain yourself and you have to do it in a way that makes everybody feel okay. I can't actually passionately speak about the things and the issues that actually bother me, that put me in my life at risk, because I'm afraid you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel like I'm attacking you. Now all of a sudden you're the victim rather than the actual victim.
I saw people talking about that with the recent, sorry, my lights keep doing that. It's a power issue we have here. With everyone recently posting about race on social media, I saw one of our pageant girls posted a story about how she confronted her own intrinsic racism. And she went to one of her teachers who was Black and cried on her about it. And I wanted to talk to her and say, you're missing the point, because now you are putting this woman in a position where it is her job to talk about your emotions and make it about you. And it's the whole phrase of, white tears, that we can just, okay, we cry about it and then it absolves our guilt, and it's supposed to be a Black person's responsibility to do the emotional labor of making us feel better.
Girl, if I had a dime for every time I've had to sit and experience that, okay, like, I'm now all of a sudden consoling you for a problem that affects me.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. But I don't want to say this, but at least we're getting somewhere. We're better than where we were before, but that doesn't mean that it's all of a sudden the problems are gone. And that's
it's scary saying that, because you don't want to lull people into this false sense of, okay, well, she said we've made progress, so, you got something. It's like the people who say, well, you have gay marriage now, what more do you want? While you're watching as our rights are continuously stripped away. If I went and married a woman, they're making it so that you can't adopt children because there is something inherently wrong with that. And that is so upsetting for me because, I have lots of friends in the LGBT community. And the thing about adoption is, you are making the active choice that you are going to be a parent. You have prepared as much as you can prepare. It's not something that is just going to happen to you. You are putting the work in. Who doesn't want to place a kid with a couple who has fought so hard for their love and who is putting the work in just to become a parent?
That is so true. Thank you for telling us that as well. So another thing I wanted to ask is, how is it that and I know, of course, you don't speak for the entire LGBT community, so I'm asking you as Jessica, what is it that you would like to see people to do to act more as allies, not to just use the phrase when it's to actually act upon that, and what can we actually do to erase the stigma?
Well, it's the end of June, and what you see in June is all of the companies and corporations plaster rainbows on everything and call it representation. But we need to see actual representation of LGBT people in the media consistently. I think it's, is it Calvin Klein right now? One of the major brands has a huge billboard out in Manhattan.
I know what
you're a Black trans woman. Yes. Those are the kinds of steps that people need to be taking. Actual representation, not just 1 month out of 12, we're going to put rainbows on everything and call it work. Exactly. What we're seeing more and more now is people listening to the younger generations, the very, very vocal high schoolers who want to get things done. And I think that's huge, is continuing to listen to young people, because they are going to tell you what they need. And it's up to us to facilitate that when, if they're younger than they're able to vote or make that kind of change, if they tell us what it is they need to feel safe, to be able to live their lives to their fullest, then we listen to that and we facilitate that. It's being able to trust people when they tell you what their lived experiences are.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I didn't send this to you actually beforehand, but I don't know if you still use this same platform or social impact initiative now that you're in the Miss USA system. But I know this was a very big part of your platform. Would you mind just telling us a little bit more about that and what it is that you were actually doing in your community to promote the issues of the LGBT community?
Absolutely. So when I competed in the Miss America organization, my platform, or social initiative impact, as you guys call it now, was LGBT advocacy, which focuses on making sure that schools are a safe and productive learning environment for all students, regardless of their actual or perceived sexual orientation and gender identity. And one of the keys in that is actual or perceived, because that kind of helps it come across to people who might be reluctant otherwise about supporting the LGBT community, when they have to realize that, okay, but if your child does not conscript to heteronormative ideals, they are going to be bullied just the same way. Every boy who wants to be a dancer or an art student instead of a football player is going to be teased for being gay. And, you don't have to have a child who is in the LGBT community, but it could be anybody's kid. It doesn't matter if your student is actually part of the LGBT community or if they just don't conform to certain social norms. You want them to be protected either way, and everyone should be protected and be able to go to school and focus on learning, because at the end of the day, I think that's something that we can all agree on, that students are in school to learn. So they should be able to have that be a safe, productive learning environment for them.
And that's amazing, the fact that we still have to reinforce that idea in this day and age. I mean, everything going on in this day and age, I've seen so many protests and people holding signs saying, why am I still fighting for this exact same thing that I fought for 60 years ago?
There was an episode I watched of John Oliver this past week, and it showed a clip of a woman who was explaining what everything was fighting for. And he talked about studies that were done after riots throughout history. And I believe it was after one of the large riots back in the 60s, they did the study about, okay, well, what do we need to do? What do we need to fix? What steps do we need to take? And the man conducting the study made the observation that it is the same results as all of the other studies done after this riot, after this protest, after this incident happened. It is the same set of recommendations that we are being given. It is the same actionable items, and we're not doing it. These protests, they're going to do studies about what do we need to change afterwards. It is going to be the same thing that we have been looking at for 100 years, that we'll do the study, they'll find out what change needs to happen, and then we hope in 20 years we're not here again.
And I remember learning that in school and college in 1968. They had one of the presidents did a commission after all the riots happened, after Robert F. Kennedy was shot, after Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. And it was the same, when you look at what those demands were, or what was found from those studies, it was the same thing. It was 2016, I was learning. I said, well, we didn't achieve that. We're still fighting for this.
Yeah.
And the same demands, actually, if you look at what the Black Panthers asked for, the same demands that we're asking for today. And people are like, what's going on? I didn't know there was racism. Well, why are there riots? How did this happen? How did we get here?
Which is wild to me. Just
They're
going,
like,
okay.
How did we get here?
Because we're not listening over and over and over again.
Over and over again. Yeah. Well, that was why I created this platform. It was to give a voice to a lot of people whose narratives get lost or pushed aside, or that people are uncomfortable hearing. And I wanted to give, like I said, just a voice to people who are different. You know, I always say it's your thoughts and your words that turn into actions, and that's what we have going on here today. And even if they don't turn into actions, it's those same thoughts and words, those microaggressions that push, you know, the biases and discrimination that we're still dealing with and working with today. So
exactly.
Thank you so much, Jess, for speaking with me today. I'm going to figure out what happened with the whole thing. It's still recording, though, so it should be.
Good. I wonder if it recorded me making funny faces at you after the call dropped, because I just kind of sat here going, Michelle.
Oh my God, if it did, I'll let you know. I'll let you know, okay?
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jess, for coming by today, and I hope I get to see you soon. It's been so long.
I hope I get to see anybody soon, honestly.
The only reason I don't have a mask is I'm in my house. Nobody's around 6 feet.
Absolutely. As soon as I go out to the bank right after this, I will be masked up.
Yeah.
But stay safe.
You too.
And keep in touch.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, love.